Hello students, this is Dr. Prats and welcome to my channel. So today we are going to start something which actually earns us our bread and butter. Can you take any guesses? Yes, we're going to talk about caries and we're going to talk about in 4 different presentations. Let's roll. As usual, the presentation involves a questioning format. We'll first understand what is a pathology, why we need to study it, what is the importance of this pathology, how did it occur, which is nothing but the etiology of caries. And usually we discuss the diagnosis and treatment as well, but in today's presentation, we are mainly dealing with the etiology. And finally, at the end, we discuss the summary of whatever we studied today and followed by the most important tips and tricks of answering your MCQ or multiple choice question. Each lesson has an objective, and at the end of this presentation you'll be able to define caries and you'll be able to describe the etiology of caries. So the what is nothing but the definition. Let's break it down and see exactly what the definition is telling you. So they say that it is an irreversible microbial disease. So irreversible meaning it cannot be reverted back to normal, and microbial disease basically indicates that this is caused by a bacteria. Simple, isn't it? Which structures are affected? It's the calcified tissues of the teeth which are affected. And this is characterized by 2 things. The first one is demineralization of the inorganic substance. Demineralization happens only to the mineralized component, isn't it? So that's nothing but the inorganic substance of the tooth. And destruction of the organic portion. So the tooth has the mineralized component, which is the inorganic substance which undergoes demineralization, and there is the organic component, which is nothing but the protein part of the tooth which undergoes destruction. So both of these together eventually lead to cavitation or caries. So that is the definition which gives you a lot of information about the etiology as well as the process of the caries itself. So that is the reason why you need to understand the definition very well. It's not putting pressure on you to remember each and every word of the definition. The essential component out of it must be for you to understand the entire gist of the disease in a very simple and easy way. So like everything else, whenever there is an attack on the body tries to defend itself, right? So whenever the microbes are attacking the tooth, the same thing happens. The body tries to kind of mineralize some part of the tooth which has undergone demineralization, but eventually there is a tip in the balance and the demineralization overtakes, and that is followed by the dissolution of the organic substance, eventually resulting in caries. The reason why we need to study caries is this is something which I always tell my students, that it is not every day that a patient comes to you with an ameloblastoma or squamous cell carcinoma or some other bigger pathology which we see in the oral cavity. Our bread and butter is caries because every single day, most of your patients who walk into your clinic are either coming because they have caries or something which has resulted as a sequelae to caries. So that is the reason why we need to understand this very, very well. And all our treatment options depend upon how well we have understood the etiology or the histopathology of this disease. I just want to discuss these early theories with you guys, not because there are going to be some questions being asked on this topic. Not everything has to do with learning and with knowledge and passing the exam. Sometimes you also need to know things because they're interesting and intriguing. So I'm just going to tell you a few theories which are quite ancient and how our ancestors thought of caries and its etiology. The first and foremost theory is the worm theory, and according to the Chinese and Sumerians, between 1000 to 5000 BC, it was proposed that worm was the basic cause of almost everything, and they also told that worm was eating the tooth from inside. So that was what suggested by the worm theory. The second theory is the humus theory, which was presented by ancient Greeks. Ancient Greeks believed that a person's physical and mental condition depends upon the balance of the four elemental fluids of the body, that is your phlegm, blood, and two types of bile, that is yellow bile and black bile. So this is what they believed, and these four elemental fluids basically coincide with the four elements of the nature, that is your water, fire, air, and earth. So that's what the ancient Greeks believed, that the imbalance of the humors was also a reason of the caries. The next theory was chemical theory proposed by Palmley, who said that wherever the food was stagnant, it underwent putrefaction, and it's kind of acquired a chemical power so that it can dissolve the tooth. So that's what he suggested in his theory. And the next theory is the septic theory, where people believed that tooth was the root cause of all sepsis or all medical diseases in the body. So whenever there was a sepsis in the tooth, they thought that that spread to other areas of the body and caused all the major medical conditions. If you go to see, somehow all of them have some sense in it, especially the worm theory, the chemical theory. They kind of make sense even in today's modern theories, which we're going to study later on. So some of the theories which have had a lot of discussion and were accepted at one point of time is Miller's chemoparasitic theory, proteolytic theory, and proteolytic chelation theory. So these three theories we're going to discuss before going ahead with some of the modern theories suggested by the scientists. So let's see one of the most acclaimed theories of caries, that is proposed by Miller. And when he says chemoparasitic theory, he basically indicates that the caries is caused by microorganisms and by the acids which are produced by it. So let's see what are some of the facts of Miller experiments. There were several types of bacteria which were seen within the caries which could produce acid. Acid was present within the deeper carious lesion, and one of the most identifiable acid was lactic acid. Food, saliva, and tooth were incubated at 37 degrees centigrade. There was a decalcification of entire crown. So this basically indicates that whenever tooth has stagnation of food, that could lead to occurrence of caries. So he said that dental decay consists of two stages. There is an initial decalcification and softening of the tissue, followed by dissolution of these softened tissue. There were some contraindications for this theory because he was unable to explain why certain sites on a tooth or certain teeth even were more prone for caries, and how smooth surface caries was initiated was not explained by this theory. It was only understood later on when the dental plaque theory was explained by Williams in 1897. Also, this theory failed to explain why some population in the world do not get caries at all. Also, this theory did not explain arrested caries. The next theory is the proteolytic theory, and Frisbee proposed it, where he said that caries happened because of a proteolytic process. So he said that there was an initial breakdown of the protein matrix or the organic matrix, and because of this, the inorganic salts became freed by their organic bond and that were later dissolved. So this was his theory. There were some evidences for this proteolytic theory, as in we could see the presence of bacteria in enamel lamellae, which are considered as proteinaceous structures or the organic structure. And the yellow and brown color of carious lesion could be due to the pigment which is formed by proteolysis. These were proposed by people who were favoring the theory, although there were contraindications where it showed that demineralization of the inorganic component is essential prior to proteolysis. So what he said was actually the other way around, so it did not stand any merit. And these people also mentioned that the yellow-brown pigment could be due to degradation products of glucose, which is methyl glyoxal and acetol. And another experiment which was done on the notobiotic rats, which is nothing but rats which do not have any bacteria in them, basically. So these were incubated with a single strain of streptococci, which, as we all know, is a non-proteolytic organism, still produced extensive caries. So that ruled out that proteolysis was the initial step of the caries. Probably it is involved, but it is definitely not as explained by the scientist. And when a chemical analysis was done, whenever there is a breakdown of protein, there should be an increase in the nitrogen and a fall in the specific gravity, but this did not happen in case of caries. So again, it ruled out the theory. The third theory is a combination of the proteolytic theory with what is called as chelation process. So basically, the author said that the proteolytic enzymes acts upon the organic content, that is the protein component, to release the chelates. And then this chelate will attack the inorganic compounds as well as organic compounds and result in caries. I hope by now it's very clear to you what is inorganic and organic. Inorganic is the mineralized component and organic is the protein matrix. There were some evidences because there were some chelators like amino acid citrates and lactates which were present within the oral cavity. And there were some in vitro experiments which showed some evidence of proteolysis and chelation happening in the caries, but the contraindications were that the chelating agents are weak. It takes a long time to decalcify by these chelating agents, and chelators were not in sufficient amount to produce this amount of decalcification. And the amount of organic matrix in enamel is so small that even if all the organic content were to form chelates, it would still not be sufficient to dissolve the calcium which is present in the tooth. So again, this theory was disproved. There were also several theories which were proposed by the 20th century scientists which shed more light on the etiopathogenesis of caries, among which I have stated a few. Let's go through one by one. In 1940, Stefan made an experiment and he showed a curve which plotted the plaque pH against the time, and this was plotted after a rinse of 10% glucose, and this kind of supported Miller's chemoparasitic theory. So let's see what happens after a 10% glucose rinse. We know that the pH of normal saliva is around 7. It is alkaline in nature, but as soon as the rinse of glucose, the pH stops dropping, and within a few minutes it goes below 5, which is the pH at which the caries occurs, basically. Okay, so below 5.5 is when the caries starts occurring, and here you can see that it's gone even below 5. And for it to start raising, it takes several minutes, almost an hour, to get back to alkaline pH. But suppose the patient eats some sucrose in this point, say after 20 minutes or 30 minutes, it again drops and it again takes an hour or so for the pH to get back to normal. So this experiment kind of showed how important the frequency of pH fall in the oral cavity is important for the occurrence of caries. In 1955, Frank J. Orland demonstrated that caries did not develop in germ-free rats that we already discussed about the notobiotic rat. And in 1960, Ron Fitzgerald and Paul Keyes demonstrated the etiological role of specific streptococci in the caries, which is Streptococcus mutans, making it an infectious and transmissible disease. We'll see further proof for this in the next lectures. It was in 1994 when ecological plaque hypothesis was proposed by Philip, when people understood the synergistic combination of the plaque biofilm with the growth of carcinogenic microorganism resulting together in the causation of caries. Another interesting theory was proposed by Jackson and Burke in 1972, which is called as the autoimmune theory, where they said that certain region of odontoblasts, I hope you remember from the histology, so this is your dental pulp, there are odontoblasts and there are subodontoblasts. These are the dendritic cells of the pulp. These are your dentinal tubules, and that's your dentin. So according to this theory, they proposed that the odontoblasts, certain regions of odontoblasts were damaged by an autoimmune process, and that led to the formation of caries in that specific site. But it was disproved because there was, first of all, no histological evidence of damage to odontoblasts before the caries reached the odontoblasts. It was the other way around, in fact. So this theory was disproved as well. Take a deep breath. Just remember what were the theories we discussed. It was the early theory and some modern theories. So among the early theories, it was worm theory, which said worm was the cause of everything. Humor, that is the imbalance between the four humors which caused the caries. Chemical agent explained that it's a chemical process. And septic theory said that the sepsis in the tooth caused all the medical diseases. And some of the modern theories we discussed were acidogenic theory, proteolytic theory, proteolytic chelation theory, 20th century discussed by scientists, and the autoimmune theory. So according to the acidogenic theory, which was proposed by Miller, it basically said that it is a chemoparasitic process involving two steps, that is the initial demineralization of the inorganic component followed by dissolution of the organic component, which pretty much stands true till today. Proteolytic theory explained that there was a proteolysis process which caused the loosening of the organic bonds, and that freed the inorganic component which underwent dissolution. That was disapproved. Proteolytic chelation theory said that because of proteolysis, there was a release of chelates from the organic component which attacked the inorganic component and caused the caries. Again, it was disapproved. The 20th century scientists proposed several theories. I think among that, the most important one was the Stephan's curve, where he demonstrated that after a rinse of 10% glucose, how the pH fell from the alkaline 7 to below 5, and it took about an hour for the pH to rise back to normal. And autoimmune theory tried to propose that there were certain regions of odontoblasts which were affected by the autoimmune disorder, and in that area the caries occurred, but it was actually the other way around. So that was easy and nice. So this is again broad headings for you to remember. The modern theories: acidogenic, proteolytic, proteolytic chelation, and what was proposed by the 20th century scientists. So one of the multiple choice questions that could be asked from this presentation, although I said this might not be asked, but I've just put it here so that you just get the gist of the presentation, and also for you to kind of analyze how an MCQ is answered. I'm not really going to give you all the important questions of the presentation. It is more or less to make you think, which will help you in answering any multiple choice question. So the question is, who thought that a person's physical and mental constitution was determined by the relative proportion of 4 elemental fluids of the body called humor? And they thought that the same was responsible for tooth decay as well. Were they Chinese? Were the Sumerians? Were the Greeks? Were the Indians? We never mentioned any theory by Indians among the theories of caries. Chinese and Sumerians basically believed that it was the worm that was eating the tooth from within, and worm was responsible for most of the maladies those days. But it was ancient Greeks who believed that an imbalance in the 4 elemental fluids, that is your phlegm, blood, black bile, and yellow bile, which was responsible for all ailments of the body, including your dental caries. So I hope, students, you understood how to answer an MCQ by ruling out all the options, by the knowledge which you have gathered, and to come to the correct answer and rule out your distractors. So if you like my presentation and if you like how I explain things to you, please subscribe to my channel and share it with your friends. And most importantly, tell me what are the other topics which you want me to help with, and also comment below if you have any doubts, and I will definitely be clearing it. These are some of my references. I have also referred to a book on cariology itself by Ernest Newbrun, so that you get all the information very easily at your desktop. So thank you and keep smiling.